I want to invite you to take a trip with me again this morning. Another journey of the imagination, just for a little while. So I invite you to sit back and relax. Close your eyes. Let the sanctuary, let the sights of the sanctuary fade away. Let the sounds around you fade away. Let the thoughts that have been racing around in your head, let those fade too. And come with me and imagine. Just imagine you are walking down a hallway. There's rooms on either side of you, and it seems as though it's probably night because the lighting is kind of dim. And it's very quiet. There's just some very soft voices, people talking in the background, and then you can hear somebody tapping keys on a keyboard. And there's this faint beep, beep, beeping that comes from down the hall. It's a slow, rhythmic sound, and it's almost hypnotic, and it beckons to you. Beep, beep, beep. So you follow it. You follow it all the way down the hall, and you reach the end of the hallway, and there's a door open on your right. And you hesitate for just a moment. You look inside, but the room itself is even more dimly lit than the hallway, and it's hard to make anything out. Then you step inside. And there you find two beds, side by side. Inside there's two elderly men, one in each bed. And as you look in the darkness, they seem to be asleep. And the only sound in the room apart from that beep, 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 that comes from the monitor, the only other sound is their breathing. And you stand there for a moment or two, you're uncertain of what to do. And then just as you're about to turn to leave, one of the men opens his eyes. And he asks you who you are. And it's not an accusation, and you get the sense that this man is used to people coming in and out of his room. He just wants to know who they are. So you tell him. He just nods, and then he looks over to the other bed. And the man there is now staring at you as well. And he says, "My friend and I are waiting to die." That's quite a statement. And you don't know quite what to say. You have actually no idea what to say. But before it can get awkward, the other man smiles and he says, "That's okay. We're both very old and very tired and very sick. We're ready." And you sort of stumble into a conversation with the men. You're doing more listening than talking. And then one of them looks at you and says, "You know what I was just thinking about?" You shake your head. And the man says, "Years ago, I donated to a project that brought fresh water to a village in Tanzania. I've always wondered how that worked out. If they're still drinking water from there." And he says, "And you know, I helped some homeless families once move into their first homes. I've always wondered how their kids are doing now." And you say something appropriately hopeful and comforting, and then you turn to the other man expecting something from him, and he just nods wisely and he says, "You know what I was thinking? you shake your head, and he smiles. He says, I was thinking, thank God for overtime. I'm so glad I had the chance to work and put an extra couple of grand away in my bank account. I close my eyes, I can almost see it. And then before you have a chance to explore that any further, the night nurse comes along and shoos you off. But as you're walking down that hallway, I ask you to think about what you just saw. And ask, who do you think, which of those men had a better understanding of stewardship? Which of those two men understood the proper use of the material and spiritual gifts that God gives them? Kind of a no-brainer, right? The only thing that would have made it more obvious is if that second guy had a medical chart that said "our fool" on it. Otherwise, it's almost exactly what Jesus was talking about in his parable. And I realized this week, thinking about this, that it's actually, this parable is the second time that Jesus has covered the same ground. First time was more subtle. But really, when you think about it, isn't the parable of the rich fool just a kind of a retelling or maybe showing a different facet of Jesus' gentle reminder to Martha? We talked about a couple of weeks ago. When he reminded Martha that it wasn't really the physical things that are important, but it's the spiritual ones. So don't worry about all this busy stuff. Take time for your spirit. It seemed that way to me, at least. And then the more I thought about it, the more I realized that this is a major theme of Jesus' message to his disciples and to us. Don't get hung up on the things of this world, because they'll only keep you from finding the true joy that comes in the next world. The joy of becoming a part of God's kingdom. And that's not really that tough a lesson to understand, but it is a hard one to put into practice. And it's not because we're evil, but it's because we are so strongly immersed in a culture of consumerism and materialism. We are stuck in a culture of newer, better, faster. How many versions of the iPhone have there been? It hasn't been out that long. This is a culture where the latest is the greatest and everything else is just leftovers. So we want what's newest and what's best. And I'm not standing up here to rail against capitalism or consumerism, but just to point out, actually just to ask, when the focus of our lives becomes acquisition rather than helping others, when the focus of our lives becomes taking care of us at the expense of others, what does that say about the state of our hearts and souls? In my life, even before I went into ministry, I had the opportunity to be in the presence of people who were dying, either actively dying or terminal. If you've ever had the same opportunity, I think you probably have the same experience. Looking back over those times and those people, nobody that I was with, their last thoughts were never about the size of their 401k. never worried about their checking account or whether they had the latest model car. Their last thoughts were about the people that they love, people that they've helped, people that have helped them along the way. I have never yet run into anybody who has died wishing that they had put in more overtime so they could have more stuff that they were just going to leave behind anyway. And it sounds really somber, and I'm sorry about that, but that's where Jesus went this week. And I think it was purposeful. I think it was Jesus saying, look, this is life and death. This is the difference between this world and God's kingdom. This world holds on to you materially. It keeps you from exploring spirituality. This world focuses you on you and not others. And the truth is, the purpose of life isn't to have, but to give. It's not to own, but to love. It's not about who you are or how important you've become, but it's about who you have loved and who you have helped along the way. And yeah, that really seems simplistic. But the world's grasp on us is strong. And it tries to convince us that we are just striving to meet our own basic needs, that's all. Nothing to be worried about there. But when you do that at the expense of others, that is an offense to God. God's love makes us wealthy. So the challenge for us then is to tear down the walls of our barns and share that love with others. Spread the wealth and spread the love. Because when we do that, we are spreading God's kingdom. And when we do that, we can actually make this world a little better. We can make it a better place for everyone. Even for us. Because when we do that, we will know the joy of being instruments of God's grace and peace.